Imagine living your entire life without ever catching a stranger's cold. Not because you're lucky, because no stranger has ever reached your home. For thousands of years, entire human societies lived exactly like this, sealed off by reefs, rapids, and distance. Then, in 1492, that changed. The result wasn't just conquest. It triggered one of the deadliest demographic collapses in human history. A small fleet of ships reached a Caribbean shoreline that October. On it lived a people who had called that coast home for centuries. What happened next didn't look like a massacre. There were gifts exchanged. There was curiosity on both sides. And yet, within a single human lifetime, a population that had thrived there for generations had been reduced to a fraction of its former size. No war was declared. No single order was given to erase them. So what actually happened? And why does the same pattern keep repeating? In different centuries on different continents, right up to the forests of Brazil today? Before any of that, this was simply a place where people lived. Families raised children along these shores. Fishermen knew every reef by memory. Elders passed stories down, one generation to the next. The Taino people had built organized villages, sophisticated agriculture, and trade networks that stretched across the islands. To European eyes expecting little but wilderness, this should have registered as contact between two fully developed societies. Instead, it became an ambush nobody saw coming, fought on a battlefield nobody could see. Inside the human body itself, the killer wasn't the sword, it was contact itself. Historians and epidemiologists point overwhelmingly to disease. Smallpox, influenza, measles. Pathogens the Taino had never encountered and against which their immune systems had no defense. In the 1970s, the historian Alfred Crosby gave this phenomenon a name. The Columbian exchange, the biological trade of crops, animals, and microbes that followed contact with the Americas. Some of that exchange fed the world, some of it ended worlds. Historians still argue over the exact numbers, but almost all agree on one thing: the loss was catastrophic. Entire communities disappeared within a few generations. But disease alone doesn't explain everything. This is where the story turns darker. The Spanish crown established the encomienda system, a form of forced labor that compelled indigenous people to work the land and the mines under threat of violence. The Dominican friar Bartolomé de las Casas lived through this era, and later became one of its fiercest critics, documenting first-hand accounts of brutality, testimony that remains one of the most damning primary sources historians have from that period. He had once benefited from the system himself before renouncing it. That alone tells you how normalized the violence had become. Disease weakened a population already being worked, starved, and terrorized into collapse. It wasn't one cause. It was two, working together, each making the other more lethal. Here is the twist that reframes everything. For centuries, the story was told as one of inevitable extinction, as though the Taino simply vanished, swallowed by history. They didn't. Genetic research over the past 2 decades has quietly overturned that narrative. Studies of mitochondrial DNA in modern Caribbean populations, particularly in Puerto Rico and Cuba, have identified Taino ancestry persisting in living descendants today. The people were nearly destroyed. They were not erased. That distinction matters, and it's one many textbooks still get wrong. It's tempting to file this away as a single tragic accident of history, a one-time collision that could never happen again. It wasn't, and it can. Move forward 500 years to the Amazon basin in the 1980s, when gold prospectors pushed illegally into Yanomami territory in Brazil and Venezuela. The result was disturbingly familiar. Measles and malaria outbreaks killed an estimated 15 to 20% of the Yanomami population in the hardest-hit areas within just 7 years, according to accounts later documented by anthropologists and indigenous rights organizations. Different century, different continent, same invisible weapon, which brings this story to the present, to a small, reef-ringed island in the Bay of Bengal. North Sentinel Island is home to the Sentinelese, one of the last peoples on Earth who remain almost entirely uncontacted, by choice and by law. The Indian government maintains an exclusion zone around the island, not out of neglect, but because contact itself is now understood as the danger. In 2018, an American man named John Allen Chow attempted an unauthorized landing to make contact. He was killed by the islanders shortly after. It became global news, framed mostly as a story about one man's death. But look closer at what the Sentinelese were actually doing, defending the one thing that has kept them alive for millennia. Distance contact was never neutral. It was never simply people's meeting. It carried, invisibly, the accumulated microbial history of one civilization directly into the unprotected biology of another, and no amount of goodwill on either side could change that. Isolation was never primitive, it was protection. And removing it, however it happens, however well-intentioned, has never once been simple. History often celebrates the moment two worlds meet. It rarely asks what happened to the world that wasn't ready. Perhaps that's why, on one small island in the Indian Ocean, the people still raise their bows whenever a stranger appears on the horizon, because history taught them what the rest of the world only learned too late.